Good afternoon and welcome to the ISCA ICAN webinar series. Today we have Sarah Majoris, school counselor at Madison Elementary School in Des Moines. She is a RAMP program through the ASCA model, and today she's going to talk about the RAMP process and how you go through it and answer any questions that you might have. We are recording the webinar today, so we're going to keep everyone on mute while Sarah talks about the process. If you have questions, you can type them into the question box, and at the end of the presentation, Sarah will go through and answer all of your questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and thank her for joining us today.
Thanks, Britt. All right, let's jump in and get started. We are going to talk today about becoming a recognized ASCA model program. Just a little bit of history. I have been at Madison for 13 years, and we first became a RAMP program in 2010 and then became re-RAMP in 2016. I will talk a little bit about this as we go along, but the process has changed a lot in even just the years since I first started. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to talk about why it's important to think about ramping your program. It is a lot of time to pursue RAMP, and you spend a lot of time getting that program in place, but there are lots of benefits. Now, of course, on the PowerPoint I said it's based on the ASCA national model, which of course we all want to adhere to as counselors. It does give some recognition for your school and your program, and gives you that confidence that your program aligns with the nationally accepted model. But I also, in addition to those things, it helps you evaluate your program for areas of improvement. I really found that the RAMP process gives you that overview of your whole program so that you can figure out what you need to change, what would be better, what could be different, and it gives you the tools to do that. It also, for me, increased my skills and knowledge in what the recognized ASCA model program would be. We all want to have a data-driven program, and so this is an excellent place to start. Even if you're just now starting to consider RAMP, we want you to really think about all of the pieces in the application and how to put those in place. As I said on the PowerPoint, it also enhances your program's effort to contribute to your student success. That is ultimately our goal. Yes, we want to have great programs, but we want to have great programs that show student growth. And this application is an overview of every aspect of your program. And so as counselors, it gives us a better understanding of where we're at and what we need to do to grow. A little bit about the timeline. As I said previously, RAMP is an extensive process. It is a long-term process. I laughed with my principal as I was going through this because he would keep asking, have you heard? Have you heard? Have you heard? And I had not multiple times because it is a very long process. If you are just now considering RAMP, applications are due by 5 o'clock on October 15th. And it's every October 15th. That is the deadline. But once you have your comprehensive school counseling program in place, you need at least one full academic year to collect that data. And so that overview of your program is an entire year's worth of work. I made a list about just kind of the step-by-step. So after you have your comprehensive program in place, you have a year of data collection. So if you are thinking that you would like to apply for RAMP in October, you have spent already the first half of this school year collecting data about your comprehensive program. And then applications are submitted on October 15th. The reviews will occur in November and December. Now, when you first submit your email or your application, you get an email that says, thank you for your application. They go through and make sure you have every component. Because if you don't have every component filled out on the online application, then they don't accept it. So reviewing occurs in November and December. I was fortunate enough this year to be asked to join a reviewing team. So I had the opportunity with a team of 3 other counselors and a lead counselor to review 3 applications. And I will tell you, having written a ramp twice and now having reviewed 3 other schools' ramp applications, it is such an extensive process and it's so much information that it does take a lot of time for that reviewing to occur. So November and December, the reviewing occurs. The results are sent out in mid-January. In fact, tomorrow would be the day that the results would be sent out. Because RAMP is such a difficult process, they have steps in place that if you are getting RAMP, your score is a 54 or above out of 60. And we'll talk more about the specific scoring for each component a little bit later, but I want you to know if you get a 54 or above, you have received RAMP. If you score a 48 to a 53, you have an opportunity to revise and resubmit your application by the end of February. So if you're getting it in the middle of January, you have about 6 weeks to go back and take the information that the reviewers send you, because when we review, we ask questions, we take a look at your data, we make suggestions on more information that you could provide, and you have an opportunity to review and send that back. If your score is a 47 or below, then you do not unfortunately receive RAMP. They are putting some new things in place where reviewers are going to be mentors for schools that receive somewhere between a 44 and a 47 so that they can figure out what part of their comprehensive program needs to be changed or increased to really meet the RAMP guidelines. Resubmissions are due in February, and then those of us that are reviewers, if one of our schools has a resubmission or more than one, then we have another month to go through those reviews. Final results are sent out in April, and then the award is given at the ASCA National Conference in July. It is a really long process, so really you're looking at about 18 months from beginning to end. So it is a time commitment, but it is so worth it. So let's get into the meat of RAMP. There are 12 components. Excuse me. Last year was the first year that they had divided out the points, because the total is 60 points. So divided out the points and weighted them based on what they felt were the different parts of the component, or different parts of the application. So the vision statement, when you're providing the vision statement, you're providing that vision statement for your school counseling program, your school, and your district vision statements. And one of the things that I really encourage people who are thinking about RAMP, print off the scoring rubric from the ASCA website, because each scoring rubric gives you a clear picture of what they're looking for. One of the notes that I wrote down for this when I was writing mine was, provides a rich textual picture of success. So I wanted to, my vision statement, I wanted to make a clear picture of what student success looked like. Now, of course, in a district, as counselors, we don't always have the input on a district vision statement, or sometimes even a building vision statement. And that is important to note when you are writing the narrative for each of these, that you're saying how much input you had on them. So how much input I had on the vision statement. My building, I was able to participate in that team that worked on a vision statement. My district, I was not. I'm from a large district. That was not a team that I was a part of. And so I put that in the narrative. Now, did my vision and my building's vision align with our district mission or vision? Of course it did, but I needed to make sure that they understood that I did not have direct impact on what our district vision was. Mission statements are the same. The school counseling program needs to have a mission statement that is clear. The school and district generally have mission statements. If they don't, that needs to be addressed in the narrative as well. And that's another thing that's in the rubric. It says, if available. If it's not available, make a note of that, because that's one thing when, as a reviewer, when we go through, that was one of my questions for one of my applications. Does your district as a whole have a mission statement? And then I want to see if that's tied back to what your counseling program mission is, as well as your school. Program goals need to be your SMART goals focused on attendance, behavior, and achievement. Everything in the RAMP application and everything in your comprehensive program needs to be tied to your program goals. I am an elementary school counselor, and we have a core curriculum that we present to our students during classroom time, and all of those things are somehow linked to my program goals regarding attendance, behavior, and achievement. Some of them very loosely, but they still have an impact. I'm thinking particularly of like personal safety. We talk about personal safety a lot with our elementary kids, but that does have to do with, you know, our behavior goals. Are you acting in a way that keeps you safe? So it is tied to that. ASCA mindsets and behaviors for student success. Oh, and I would like to go back and just have you notice that program goals are weighted at 6 points because they are so vital to this application. So it's really important to focus on what your program goals are as you go through the entire application. Back to number 4, ASCA mindsets and behaviors for student success. This is where you go through everything that you do as a counselor and figure out what you are providing for your students. I do it based on my core curriculum, as well as if there were a small group or something that a large number of kids would get. Like all of my 4th and 5th graders this year are receiving student success skills. So that would be something that I would, when I go through the ASCA mindsets and behaviors, figure out where that fits, because everybody's receiving it. So it's something that everyone is getting in your program. I will tell you, when I did my application, I was still on standards, competencies, and indicators, and when I submitted, I had a choice. So I actually went through and did the standards, competencies, and indicators, as well as the mindsets and behaviors, just because I wanted to see the difference. The mindsets and behaviors are so much more broad that it really, you know, we can find those places where, yes, we are teaching this big idea to our students in whatever grade, and marking that so that we're seeing that we're meeting those standards. Number 5 is the annual agreement. Every counselor in your building needs to have their own annual agreement, and it needs to be discussed and signed by the counselor and the principal prior to the start of the school year. And some of these things that I'm pointing out, like having it signed prior to the start of the school year or within the first week of the school year, those are things that as a RAMP reviewer we look for, because if you're having your RAMP application submitted but your annual agreement was signed in December, that makes us question, did you not have that program in place or those things in place prior to that, or why was that not signed until halfway through the school year? So I know some of it sounds a little nitpicky, but when people are reviewing, it is we are searching for details and very specific information. And our scoring rubric is based on what is provided from the ASCA model online. And if you print that off, that's what we have. It's just in a different format, but it gives us each detailed item that we're looking for. Advisory council is another important part of RAMP, and it's really important to understand that the advisory council should not just be convened to apply for RAMP. It needs to be something that is ongoing and helps you move your program forward, or people that have a vested interest in your program that want to make it more successful. So if you're a high school counselor, one of the things I would suggest is having students on your advisory council. As an elementary person, I did not have students on my advisory council, but I had parents and community members, people from my building, teachers and staff, and as well as my administrator. So it gives you a really clear picture of what you need to have in your advisory council, and when you are presenting your RAMP application, you need to meet at least twice a year, once per semester. And I really think it's important when you are starting this process to make sure, because your advisory council is a part of approving your goals and your calendar and a part of that annual agreement. So it is important to have that meeting prior to the start of the school year if possible, or within those first couple of weeks, so that that timeline fits. Another thing with the advisory council is keeping good notes instead of just giving an outline of what you're doing. Make sure that you're talking about or writing down those conversations that people are having, or someone suggested this, or what input the people on your advisory council are having, so we can see what impact they have on your overall program. Calendars need to cover every part of your day and week, and match the allocations on your annual agreement. And yes, reviewers do check. We do check to make sure that the breakdown of time that you're putting on your calendars or on your agreement meets the time that you're putting on your calendars. Now, if there's something crazy that happens during that day, whether it's, you have an emergency, I know one of my times was there was something had happened in my building, and so I had to change a lot of the things. So my time didn't, on my calendar for that week, that snapshot of that week, did not match the time percentages. And so in my narrative, I wrote, this is what happened in my building, and this is why the time did not match. Now, every other week, we have a classroom at this time or a small group at this time, but I needed this time to process with a different group of kids. So if you are explaining, because we all know we are counselors, things happen, we need to be available for our students during emergencies, and reviewers understand that, but it needs to be very clearly articulated in your narrative. For number 8, which is the school counseling core curriculum action plan and lessons plans, for that you need to include all of your core curriculum for the school year. So as I mentioned earlier, as an elementary counselor, I have different units that I need to provide to all of my students. So my core curriculum action plans are divided by unit of study and then divided down by grade level. And also connect back to my program goals, as I mentioned earlier, because they want to see how those program goals, and by they I mean the RAMP reviewers, want to see how those program goals weave through your entire program. They're driving your program. You have these goals that are SMART goals. They're specific and they're measurable based on attendance, behavior, and achievement, and you want to see the outcomes of those goals. And so everything we do, whether it's that core curriculum or the small group responsive services, or even the closing the gap, reflect back to those program goals so that our outcome data will show the difference that we've made for our students. It is also really important, and you will see in the rubric when you read through that, that there needs to be a set of lesson plans for one grade level, and it would be one unit of study. So if you are doing 4 lessons on mindfulness to help with behavior, then those would be your lesson plans. Again, another little nitpicky item, be sure to use the ASCA model template for lesson plans, because that is one of the things as reviewers, they ask us, did they use the ASCA template? And we have to check that box. So when I write my lesson plans for myself, I do not always use the ASCA template. What I use is very close, and so it didn't take a lot for me to transfer that over. But it was really important for that to be a part of my application, that I wanted to follow their guidelines. The school counseling core curriculum results report, you only have to include one results report for one unit of study for one grade level. So that grade level that you are teaching mindfulness to, then you would do a results report on that curriculum lesson. So I think it's important for us to also understand, though, if we are really focused on a comprehensive counseling program, it shouldn't just be about the paperwork part of it. It needs to be about, like, I do these things because it shows me how my program is moving along. A lot of them, I am a paper person. I like paper calendars. I like paper. And so I print off these things and then I write in them. So I have the core curriculum results reports for my action plans. For the purposes of this application, you only need to provide one. But I do think I have really found that in this application process, it is really important for me to track the progress of my counseling program, not just in one thing that is required, but I have found value in doing it for everything. Again, it's not always because of time constraints. You know, like I said, sometimes it's paper, sometimes it's chicken scratch of, hey, I did this and this is what happened, but then I'm still tracking that data and it's tying back to my program goals. So at any time someone could come in and say, what are you doing and what difference is it making? And I can pull that paper out and show them, this is the impact it had. Moving on to small group responsive services. This is one that it has recently changed. Again, very important to make sure that you are keeping track of all of your small groups throughout the course of the year. The rubric that you can print off online tells you that you need to include an action plan for all small groups that you do throughout the year. Now, when I had my RAMP review session at ASCA before I submitted my application, and I was talking to the gentleman who was looking over that for me, I had one small group action plan that I had included in the application, and we were going through the rubric, and I had printed it off months earlier, and it had recently changed. So so I was glad that I had all of those action plans for every group that I'd done. Now, some of them I did have to go back and type in, but it's really important that you keep that record so that you can look back and see how kids are different from year to year, or what they need, or what services they've had. So this is really just a good practice to get into prior to applying for RAMP, but also as a part of this, you need to have that for a part of your application, every single group that you provide. Closing the gap results report, it's really important to articulate how the gap was identified and how, again, tie it back to your program goals. How does it relate to your program goals? What is the gap that you've identified in your building, and how are you going to help make that different? And then the last one is your program evaluation. And this is where you have an opportunity to articulate leadership, advocacy, and collaboration skills that led to the systemic change in your building. And you have to detail the systemic change that is happening. Now, you have two different ways that you can do this part. One is a narrative, as I mentioned before. For all of these, you get to do a narrative. The other is you can do a video. I have seen both. And for me, I did a narrative because I feel like I can articulate myself better when I have time to write it down, and then I look it over, and then I rewrite it, and I change it. It was kind of an ongoing process for me. But I have seen videos that are truly excellent representations of the overall program. It does need to have leadership, advocacy, and collaboration, and how that led to systemic change, because that is a part of the rubric. And as a reviewer, that is what we're specifically looking for in all of the exciting things that we get to see on the video. I'm thinking of one in particular from a high school that they had a student narrate it, and it was excellent. And they talked specifically about each of these things, leadership, advocacy, and collaboration, and how that changed their school and their students. So you have a choice there on how you want to do it. Now, each of these components, as I mentioned, is weighted with different points. We'll talk a little bit more about the scoring part of it in a little bit. But I do want to say, for each of these, you put these things in place, and so you'll have all of these papers with your annual agreement. Some people might have them all electronically, but then for each of them you have an opportunity to do a narrative. And the narratives range from, I believe, 500 words up to the...
I'm in.
The program evaluation is 1,200 words.
Yeah, I can do that.
Now,
Joe's
because it's an,
the day, so.
Because it's an online.
Okay, because I mean, well, I didn't know I can wear like dress pants, or I can wear a suit or whatever.
Hello.
Hold on.
Okay, we're going to go on. Because
I'm doing a webinar. No, I'm on mute. But.
No, you're not. I can hear you. Okay, so the program evaluation part, you have up to 1,500 words. I will tell you, I was very particular about how many. I wanted to use all of my words possible because I really wanted them to get a clear picture of what my comprehensive program was. And so I used every word, and I counted through a Word document, and then I put it in the computer format because you're applying online. And so the word count is a little bit different, so you need to be careful with that a little bit. But I would really encourage whoever is applying for RAMP to really use the narratives as an asset. You can use every word and really articulate your program. And if you think to yourself, as I did, well, that should just be a given, that should be something that they would understand as a part of a counseling program, you need to really articulate that and be clear about every aspect. We don't, as reviewers, we have been told, do not assume that something is a part of someone's program unless they put it in their application. All right, so I really would like to guide you to some of the great resources that are available. As I said, on the ASCA website, you can print off the rubric. That is the first document that I printed off and read through, and it gives you step-by-step what you need to have in each of the components of your RAMP application. And it gives you what you can do to get those exemplary scores, which would be either the 3 or the 5 or the 6, whatever the highest score is. And really, as I did, I highlighted each part that I needed to have in there, and then as I was going through my final application, I would check off, yep, I have this, yes, I have this, yes, this is a part of my application, so that I was sure that it was all there. There are also examples of outstanding applications online. If you go to the ASCA website and go to the RAMP section, you can look at the examples that they have, and those examples are from schools of distinction is what they're calling them, and they have received a perfect score. So really good examples for you to take a look at, and they have some that are high school and some that are elementary examples, so whichever level you're at, middle school as well, whichever level you're at, you can get a really good example. Also, and I have a picture of it there, the ASCA model implementation guide, the blue book, is a new book. It came out last summer, I believe, and it goes through the implementing a model program, but also in this book there are different sections that talk about RAMP tips. So, for example, for the mindsets and behavior section, it goes through and tells you what you should do to help with your RAMP application. Okay, and one of them I'd like to point out is use the narrative, which I just told you to do. It's really important and a really good thing to be able to articulate every part of your program. I think that using the narrative is probably a RAMP tip throughout the book, but there are also lots of other good ideas, plus the forms that you can use for your application. Part of becoming a RAMP school is really understanding data. We want to have data-driven programs. It is really a vital component of our school counseling programs. If I can show how my students are different because of what I've done, the impact that I've had in whether attendance, behavior, or achievement, then I am able to show that to my principal, to my teachers. I'm given more access to kids the more I show what I am capable of doing. So it's really important. I put this slide in here because I really think it's important for us to understand what is perception data, what is process data, and what is outcome data. And I put this in here because as a reviewer, some of the applications I was getting, they were kind of jumbled or messed up. There are a couple of places where it specifically asks for perception data, and so it's really important to be talking to the students and the teachers, whomever you want to get that perception data from, to figure out what is most important for that particular component of the application. Outcome data, it is imperative that your program goals be focused on outcome data. What do you want to do with attendance? What kind of behavior changes do you want to make? What achievement can you impact through your counseling program? And also showing what you've done. So attendance has increased in this particular group of students. It might be one of your closing the gap, you know, based on behavior. My closing gap was based on behavior with an entire cohort of kids. And so I was able to show this is what we did, and because of those interventions, it was multiple interventions, not just one, but because of those interventions, behavior data changed over time. It's not just a snapshot, okay, I did a 6-week intervention and here's what happened at the end of that 6 weeks. It's here's what happened at the end of that 6 weeks, and then again 6 weeks later, this is what happened. So outcome data is a vital piece of the RAMP application. And as counselors, we know that the work that we do is important, but showing the data allows us the opportunity to really let people know how students have changed because of what we've done. The benefits of RAMP are, you can see them, they're right there. So I'm not going to read them all to you. I do think it's important that we look at that last one of advocacy for school counselors and school counseling program. Again, it ties back to showing the data, showing how kids are different because of what we've done. There are lots of other fun things about RAMP. You know, you get a plaque and you get a picture and your name's in the magazine, and you get to go to a dinner if you go to the ASCA conference, and those things are great, but I pursued RAMP because I wanted to see, first of all, if I had a comprehensive program, if I was hitting that mark, but also because I wanted to show people that as a counselor, this is what we're capable of. This is what we can do to help kids be successful. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm sure you're where you are. We want to help kids be successful. RAMP is also now for 5 years, a 5-year distinction. So you will, if you apply for RAMP, you will have that award and you will be a RAMP school for 5 years. And then at that time you need to reapply and you can get a re-RAMP. And then again, that's good for another 5 years. So, all right. So some of the tips and tricks that I would like to share with you based on my experience as a person who pursued RAMP and also as a RAMP reviewer. Number one, use the ASCA model templates. It says it in the rubric, and it is so important. And I know some of you are very technologically advanced people and you have these great things that you have made and they're user-friendly for you. And I think it's important for you to put those in your application if you have some sort of, you know, your use of time or whatever it is that you like. But you also have to put the ASCA model template one in there so that we see that you're using that. Okay. I've mentioned it throughout this presentation. Use the scoring rubric. Include everything that you see in the scoring rubric and use it as your guide. It will really guide you through the entire process. Clearly articulate everything in your narrative. Again, I said this before, even if you think that it is something that everyone does or it is just understood or it is assumed, write it down, be clear, really talk about all of the things that you do in your program. It is important to use that narrative to your advantage. The more information available, the more complete the application and the less questions the reviewers will have. So if you are putting every part of your program in your narrative and really articulating everything that goes on, the reviewers won't have to ask as many questions, and your score will be higher. It is really important to understand that RAMP is a time-intensive process. Do not wait till the last minute. Don't wait until October 4th or 5th, or even if you work well under pressure, don't wait until the end, because it would be very disappointing if you weren't able to complete the application in time or as well as you'd really like to, because RAMP reviewers are very detail oriented. We are trained to read for very specific things, and so it's really important to make sure that you have done your very best on your application, articulated everything that you wanted to, checked it with the scoring rubric to make sure that you have everything that we're looking for. Don't leave anything blank. Okay. RAMP is like a giant puzzle. Everything is tied together through the program goals, and each piece has an important role in a comprehensive school counseling program. So if you are looking at the large picture, the big picture, you're thinking about all of these 12 components are little pieces that need to be put together, and they need to fit together well. Okay, so scoring. This is something that when I submitted my most recent RAMP application, I was 2 points below receiving RAMP. So I was sent my review from my reviewers, my form from my reviewers, and was given that time to revise anything, go over things, and some of the questions that they asked were, as I said, things that I had just assumed, okay, this is a part of a comprehensive counseling program, it's a part of mine, it's in there, they can read between the lines. They did not, and so I had to revise. So I had some questions about the scoring. And so I sent an email, and some of this information is what I received from that email so that I had a clearer picture of how the scores were given. So after you submit your application, each applicant is given a team. As a reviewer, we were given 3 schools. So in my team, there were 3 reviewers and then a lead reviewer. When we go through those, we each give our own score. We do that individually. So the team members all review the applications individually. And as a team, we then had a conference call where we would go through all of the scores that we had given. Now, all of the scores have to be within 1 point of each other. So, as I put in here in the example, an application will not receive a 2 and a 5 for the same section. The 5 would have to come down, or the 2 would have to go up, or both. So every score has to be within a point. All 3 of the scores are averaged together to calculate the final score. Okay, and then as we talked about, scores of 54 or above receive RAMP automatically. Scores between 48 and 53 can revise and resubmit their applications if they choose. Some of them may choose not to. I'm not quite sure why, but some have. And then scores at 47 or below do not receive RAMP. All right, so I am going to answer some of your questions now.
Would you like me to read the questions?
You know what, I would. I'm having some trouble seeing them.
Okay, so first question. So when I submit in October, am I submitting the prior year's information, or would I submit my most current annual agreement, which would be dated 8 to 10 weeks before I submit?
When you submit in October, everything you are submitting is from the previous school year. So if you are submitting this coming October, everything that you're doing in 16-17 will be your application. And then, so you won't add your agreement from the following year. It will be last year's agreement. But again, all of those times need to be very specific. Your agreement for 16-17 needed to be signed probably sometime in August or early September of 2016.
Okay. Next question. What are the percentage of applications approved?
When I received RAMP, I believe there were 105 applications, and there were 80 that received RAMP. So about 75%, 75 to 80%.
Okay. Are there K-12 programs that have been approved, and if so, suggestions for these programs?
Yes, there are K-12 programs that have received RAMP. Suggestions. That is, well, as I said, RAMP is a time-intensive process. I do think that if you are looking at a K-12 program, it might be easier for you to divide your, not dividing your program, but dividing your information, elementary and secondary, just to give the reviewers a clear picture of your K-12 programming. Because I think as an elementary counselor, I know what a classroom counseling lesson looks like. But if I were to go to a high school, it would look different, obviously. So if you are doing an application, and I know it sounds like it would be a lot more work, but to divide that into elementary and secondary. I wonder, it would be good, and I don't know because I haven't looked, but if there are examples of K-12 programs on the website. And that I will look at that, and if you would like to send me an email, I would be happy to talk more about that specifically. That's a really good question.
Okay, next question. How many SMART goals are recommended?
Three SMART goals. And they give you, there's a drop-down box of different things that they're addressing, but I really feel like it's important to stick to attendance, behavior, and achievement, because as counselors for a comprehensive program, those are our main things. Now, I did have an application that I was a part of reviewing this year that only had 2 because they didn't have attendance issues. They were a private school. Attendance was not a concern. So that is okay as well, but they do recommend that you have the 3 SMART goals, one for attendance, behavior, and achievement.
Okay. Have you used the SCOOT system, or do you have any thoughts on how that could be helpful for RAMP?
I have not personally used it. I believe that our district has purchased that for our secondary counselors. Our elementary coordinator put a time analysis. We do a time analysis every semester where we go through, and I really feel like it's very valuable to do a time analysis and figure out where you're using your time, and if it really does match up or is closely matched with what the recommendations through ASCA are. I have not used Scoot Up, but I have heard great things about it. There are some other counselors that I know that do use that particularly. I also have just printed off, as I said, I'm a paper person, printed off a daily form, and I make a tally mark for the different sections, whether it's classroom or, classroom time, responsive services, and so I have that if I just want a snapshot for myself.
Are your program goals similar from year to year, and you're just improving your numbers or targets so that your core curriculum is not completely changing from year to year?
Yes, yes. My program goals, they're not completely different. I mean, of course, they're based on my data, what my data shows. I think there will always be attendance issues that I can address. There will always be behavior issues that I can address. In terms of academics, mine is more focused on a specific grade level. When I did my RAMP application, my academic goal was focused on improving Iowa assessment scores for my then 4th graders. They have now left my building, and so you know, another grade level comes into that. Now they might not need as much improvement, but there might be, you know, a closing the gap issue in there. Like I might have a gap that I need to identify for academics. So yes, my goals are similar from year to year, but I do make sure that I'm checking my data to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of my students.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
If you have additional questions, sorry, Britt, if you have additional questions, please feel free to email me. I am happy to answer questions. I am happy to discuss, you know, maybe read through a narrative and give suggestions. I would be happy to do any of that.
That was actually the question that just came in. Can I call you as I go through the process? So
absolutely. You know, and I was also thinking one of the most beneficial things that I was able to do when the ASCA conference was in Phoenix a few years ago, my district paid for me to sit down with a ramp reviewer and have a one-on-one conversation, and it was so beneficial, and I really learned a lot and was able to make some changes to my application. Now I will tell you, I sat down with him and I still was in that window where I had to revise. So there is some subjectivity in this process, and we do have to understand that. But I do think that there's a possibility that I'm just kind of kicking around some ideas of doing something again at ISCA, where if you have an application and you are, or you're in the process of doing that application and you'd like to talk about it, we can have a conversation and really talk about that. But yes, please feel free to call me or send me an email. I would be happy to help, because I think this is a really important tool for counselors in our state and in our buildings and in our districts to show what we can do.
okay. The last question is if we can get a copy of the slides from the presentation. Is that okay with you, Sarah?
Yes, that is just fine.
Okay, so we will, we've recorded the session, and when it goes up on the ISCA website and the ICAN website, the PowerPoint will be there for download from the webinar pages on those websites. So we'll get that up in the next couple of days. If there aren't any other questions, I don't see any more coming in. So I want to thank Sarah for taking the time to go through the RAMP process today, and thank all of you for joining us. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.